Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 601 for the 19th of April 2020. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia, and on the other side of the world. This week's special co-host, it's Celestia Ward, all the way in Las Vegas. Hi, Celestia.
Hi, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, considering, all things considering. Sydney's not doing too bad, I must say. I mean, there are a lot of people in a very tough situation, of course, with the unemployment. But by and large, I think Australia's not doing as bad as many other places in the world. What's life like in Las Vegas under these conditions? And I really can't imagine Las Vegas being anything other than bubbling and crazy.
Well, it's always going to be a little bit crazy here, but you were saying that Australia's coping fairly well, so I take it your main source of income and entire reason for being hasn't completely drained away?
Well, Sydney, Australia is quite diverse in that respect, but I can understand what you're saying. I mean, Las Vegas is a tourist town.
Yeah, we all, most of the people I know certainly make their money due to the tourist income or indirectly because of the tourist income. And we have no tourists. Now, I got to say, I'm very pleased with the powers that be, that they decided to shut things down as early as they did. I honestly thought they would be holdouts and try to keep everything open and all the money flowing in and all the tourists drinking their martinis until the very last moment. And so I was really bracing for a terrible, outbreak here, because it could really spread in our casino. In our casino floors are pretty packed with people all the time.
Wow. I mean, again, you're right. And every time I've been there for the amazing meeting or what have you, it's just been people. It's just been crazy.
Yes. So I am more than happy to sit this out. In fact, there's some local wrangling going on between our mayor, Carolyn Goodman. The mayor of Las Vegas is arguing with the governor of Nevada. The mayor wants to open things up right away, and the governor wants to hold off and just take the natural steps you would need to take scientifically to make sure we aren't going to end up with a surge of cases a week after we open.
What's making the news here as I record are various protests across the United States. People out in their pickup trucks and their big flags and their overalls railing and saying, how dare you do this lockout? This is against the Constitution. I'm being stepped on. I've got the rights. And they're all cozying up together. And I just dread to think what might happen.
Yeah. I hope that's not the picture that everybody outside the United States has of every American. That's a small subset of our population. That does not represent our entire population. And I'm just, as far as, that's the same group of people that also will be protesting against vaccinations and other science-based interventions that are meant to help, public health. Near as I can figure, I think I'm going to start, circulating a rumor, a conspiracy that the virus was released by the government in order to make people who had a strong sense of freedom and independence go out and protest and then get killed off right away so that there would be no more resistance. So if you are a person with a strong sense of independence and freedom, you should stay inside right now so that you're available to fight later.
Yeah, good luck with that. That requires some level of thinking. I haven't seen much evidence of that amongst a certain group of the population. Well, all around the world, really. And talking about people who aren't exhibiting a great deal of intelligence, one of the segments on this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone, coming on a little bit later on, we look at past winners of the Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award who have suddenly and dramatically come back to try to claim the award again. And these are all people vaguely, you could vaguely say are involved in the health industry in some tenuous way. Making all sorts of crazy claims about COVID-19 and what you can do or what you shouldn't do about it. You must be getting some crazy claims over there.
Oh, heavens, yes. Yeah, we've got our fair share of chiropractors saying that they can offer, some immune-boosting spinal adjustments and essential oils, people. And even on one of my favorite cooking shows, it's annoying because one of the hosts of the cooking shows keeps talking about how, you should cook with this herb and that herb because these are known to boost your immunity. I read all about it. I'm like, I bet you do.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's not just confined to Australia, I see. But coming up, I must say, coming up at the top of the show, we talk about, this is hard to get away from COVID-19. We talk to Michael Marshall from the Good Thinking Society in the UK, and he's going to talk to us about his podcast, Be Reasonable, and also some of the investigations the Good Thinking Society has done into claims made by UK homeopaths when it comes to treating COVID-19. Michael Marshall has been a long time regular guest on the Skeptic Zone, so we'll look forward to that.
Wonderful.
Also, coming up this week, we have Michelle Bijkersma with her continuing segment, Logical Fallacies. This week, we're going to look at special pleading. Now, this is when you might, the best example I know are water diviners and psychics. When they fail a test, they'll come up with that's because my shoes were wrong today. Things like that. Or the best one of all is they'll say, yes, but you can't test psychic powers. I remember hearing lots of funny special pleading when we used to do the tests in Las Vegas, of course, at the amazing meeting. Then to round off the... you were there? That's where I met you, wasn't it, at an amazing meeting?
Oh, it must have been years ago. I've known you for, has it been like a decade yet?
Quite possibly, because I remember you were there and you gave me one of your cards because... So, as some people might know, there's a caricature of me with Pegasus the pig and a bent spoon, which I've been using for some years now, and Maynard's cartoon character, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with.
Maynard is a cartoon character.
He is a cartoon character. Him behind the desk, that's all your work. That's all your work. Now, before we mention the last segment coming up on this week's show, you, of course, make your living doing caricatures on the Strip and around Las Vegas. And I know it's tough for you at the moment. Where can people go to check out your wonderful work and possibly score a commission from you?
Oh, actually, many of the artists and content providers out there are having sort of a, not so much an everything must go sale as an everything must please keep going a little bit sale.
Right.
And I've done the same thing. I've wiped everything off of my website as far as live performance, because obviously I'm not going to be drawing at any high-end conventions or exclusive parties this month, but I'm offering a digital quickie commission. I'm doing like $30 quick digital caricatures. If people are interested, they can check out www.twoheadsstudios.com, and that's with the numeral 2.
We'll put a link in this week's show notes, but it's true, Celestia. Everybody I know suddenly, I guess we all have to adjust to a new way of working, don't we?
And we will. We're going to get, this is not going to end us. This is just going to be an interesting time in history.
It certainly is. We're living through it. And to round off the show, it's the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham. And this week, Tim will review The Science of Miracles, a book by Joe Nickell, the famous paranormal investigator. Well, Celestia, I think it's time we should get on with the show.
Absolutely. I'm going to run to the kitchen, and I think I will scoop out some of the homemade hummus I made earlier in my food processor, because you got all the time in the world now to make special fancy recipes. And I'll have that with some toasted pita bread.
Ooh, well, while you do that, I hope we all enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Joining me now on the line all the way from locked down Liverpool, it's Michael Marshall from the Good Thinking Society. Hi, Marsh.
Hey, Richard, how are you doing?
You know what? It's not too bad here in Sydney, Australia. It's a nice sunny day outside. I'll go out for my government-authorised exercise a bit later on, and I'll be sure to listen to the latest Skeptics with a K, or even a back episode, I should say, of Be Reasonable. And let me talk about Be Reasonable for a moment, because I keep running promotions for that because I think it's such a worthwhile podcast. Now, I think that's on hiatus at the moment.
Yeah, it is. It's been tricky. So it's such a strange show to do. So if people don't know Be Reasonable, to show where I interview someone who is from the complete opposite side of an issue to the one that we skeptics would be on. But instead of having an aggressive conversation or a debate or a kind of trying to win the argument, I try and actually hear from them and listen to them, understand what kind of got them to that position. And it's a show I've been doing for quite a lot of years, but I haven't done an episode for quite some time now. And it's partly tricky because the one thing I don't want to do is continually repeat the same subjects, and we have yet another conversation with a psychic and that kind of play out in a way that is less informative. And the other thing is, when you have so many other things going on, it takes quite a lot of mental energy to be in the right space to do it, and I've sort of struggled with that for a little bit. But it's still a project I care a lot about, and I do fully intend to get episodes up and running again just as soon as I find a moment of time. And strangely enough, being in lockdown, the amount of time that I have seems to have gotten much smaller rather than more plentiful at the moment.
You'll probably find somebody who will tell you all about 5G and coronavirus at the rate things are going. Now, folks, Be Reasonable. As I say, I keep running promotions for it because it is a really worthwhile podcast for any skeptic to listen to, because you really do, Marsh, you really do get into the mind of the believer because of your the attitude you take on the show, which is really more of a gentle conversation.
Well, I think it's really important for us to understand what the people we disagree with actually think. Otherwise, what we end up doing is we end up constructing elaborate straw men that actually bear almost no resemblance to the actual ideas that we're countering and disagreeing with. So it's that principle really is, if you want to debunk an argument, you have to first listen to the argument and understand it, because if we just go around assuming what everybody we disagree with is actually thinking and throwing out the kind of counter arguments we think will counter the arguments we assume they're making, if we're countering arguments they're not actually making, then we're not only wasting our time, but we're also completely ineffective when it comes to anybody who might encounter those other arguments, because they aren't hearing valid, informed skepticism. They'll hear instead somebody who thinks they know everything and listens to nothing. So I think it's really important we do, as much as possible, engage with the arguments and talk to people we disagree with, and have that at a kind of at a human conversational level too, so they don't think we're caricaturist bad guys.
Yes.
So they understand that we're also people with the best of intentions.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've probably met the same sort of people I have over the years, these strident armchair skeptics who will know a little bit about skepticism, decide the subject they're looking at is complete and utter bunk, and will take a very narrow-minded attitude.
Yeah, and it's in a way going into finding skepticism as a movement. I think lots of us are like that to begin with, and I certainly was. When I first found skepticism as an idea, as a community, I was incredibly excited by it, and I wanted to tell everybody all this new stuff that I'd found out. And I almost certainly just, in lots of occasions, just parroted arguments that I'd heard elsewhere, and talked people's ears off and bored them, and wasn't particularly necessarily charitable to the people we disagree with. But I think if you're in skepticism for long enough that you realise that what you really want is to affect change and to help people, you realise that gung-ho, holier-than-thou, smarter-than-thou approach absolutely doesn't help people. It doesn't reach anybody. It doesn't really change any minds. It might make you feel better, but it does nothing to actually affect the world around you. And if you really want to make a change, you have to kind of adapt your approach, adapt your tactics, and get a lot more open-minded to what the other people are saying, so you're in a much better position to critique it with enough gentleness that they're actually going to listen to you.
Absolutely. Now, folks, if you want to catch up on Be Reasonable, I'll add a link in this week's show notes. It's just the thing to help you get through the lockdown at the moment. But let's move on to other subjects, Marsh, other topics, well, in a way. And this came to my attention just a few days ago, an article in the Times, and the headline is "Homeopaths Risking Lives with Bogus Coronavirus Treatments." Now, we've been seeing in the last couple of weeks, coming across my desk, have been a lot of far-fetched claims to do with coronavirus. What's the story behind this particular news item?
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate but not surprising that there are an awful lot of homeopaths here in the UK who see this global pandemic not just as an international catastrophe that needs a public health intervention to manage, but as an opportunity to demonstrate to people the effectiveness, or the so-called effectiveness of homeopathy and the treatments that they believe in and that they sell. So what we've seen is, unfortunately, lots and lots of homeopaths within the Society of Homeopaths, which is the UK's register of homeopaths, making claims about coronavirus. And there are some of them who are saying, I'll do online consultations about coronavirus. There are some people actually offering a corona discount for their treatment. So if you enter the offer code corona, you can get money off. And there are people who are saying that right now I'm busier than ever because of all the people I'm seeing over online consultations to treat their coronavirus. So we've seen this slew of misinformation. And the way that this story actually came about in the Times is that I went through with a couple of other skeptics in the UK, went through hundreds of websites of registrants of the Society of Homeopaths to see what they're saying about coronavirus, and compiled essentially a bit of a report of all of these different claims, and we published that in the Times. And it's what's particularly shocking is it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about the anti-vax movement within inside the Society of Homeopaths. The number of homeopaths who said vaccines are dangerous, vaccines cause autism, homeopathy cures autism, and we were arguing, as you'll remember at the time, that the fact that the Society of Homeopaths was not taking sufficient action against those claims meant that they should have their accreditation, their government accreditation, removed because they aren't working effectively to protect the public from misleading and potentially dangerous claims. And lo and behold, coronavirus pandemic hits the UK, and we see a slew of homeopaths from exactly the same membership body making exactly the same kind of level of dangerous and misleading claims, encouraging people to turn to sugar pills when facing this pandemic that's killing literally tens of thousands of people. It's shocking, really.
It is shocking because here in Australia, I think the general perception is we're doing okay. Compared to some countries in the world, we're getting off lightly for whatever reason that is, and that'll all come out in the wash later on. But I know in the UK, it is a dreadful situation at the moment.
Yeah, it's gone very badly here in the UK, and when all of Europe was going into lockdown, the UK government didn't go into lockdown. It refused to do that. There was even a strategy mentioned at one point that we should just allow Boris Johnson went on television, our Prime Minister, and said we should allow the virus to pass through society and to take this on the chin, essentially to say have so many UK citizens infected with it that we eventually develop the immunity that might come from having had the disease. But of course, in doing that, you're exposing thousands or hundreds of thousands of vulnerable people to a disease that they won't be able to recover from or recover from well, and ends up swamping the hospitals. And that's what we're seeing, unfortunately. I think we've passed 14,000 deaths or maybe more than that even. And every day is just another unfortunate series of very high numbers. And it's shocking to see that when the rest of Europe was already starting to experience serious issues and was going into lockdown, we looked at that and thought, no, we as a country will be okay. There was a day even while Italy was under lockdown, the government thought it was perfectly fine for a big horse racing event to go ahead, the Cheltenham Festival, which 250,000 people gathered at, and 3,000 fans from Atletico Madrid were allowed to fly into Liverpool, where I live, to attend a football match. And this was at the time that Madrid was undergoing a major outbreak of coronavirus, and those 3,000 fans were allowed to just come into the city and wander around because the government didn't think it was wise to shut things down. So we're seeing a lot of that, unfortunately, come home to roost, and it's the people who are most vulnerable who bear the brunt of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. It is not a good thing to see at all. It is quite horrifying. Now, just getting back to one of the homeopaths, let's take an example, and it's the one that I can see mentioned on the Times article. Sage Homeopathy, a North London-based business, states on its website that homeopathy can be, quote, very effective in treating flu, and COVID-19 is no exception, end quote. Now, I would imagine, Marsh, and this is something that you and I have seen over the years, that most, I'd hesitate to say all, but certainly most homeopaths would sincerely believe that their sugar pills can actually treat this virus and everything else.
Yeah, I think they do. And in many ways, that's what makes them so dangerous right now. Because if you are someone who didn't believe in what you're doing, maybe you don't go quite as far as to say, I can cure this global pandemic. But if you sincerely believe that what you have is not just another form of not just a form of alternative medicine that is good for coughs and headaches and hay fever and self-limiting illnesses, but you actually have an entirely alternative form of medicine that's on par, if not better than conventional medicine, then it's understandable why you might think, well, absolutely, I can cure this epidemic that's stricken the world. But unfortunately, if the thing that you're selling is nothing more than sugar pills, what you're doing is encouraging people to either eschew real treatment or to potentially eschew the kind of social distancing measures that we absolutely need to be taking in order to protect those around us, or even to delay seeking genuine help when they start to experience severe symptoms. So there is no good outcome from somebody taking homeopathy when they need to be taking something else. This is just at best a waste of time and money, and at worst actively putting people's lives in danger from people who are sincere, but they're going to do a sincere amount of damage to people.
Yeah, and it brings home the point again. And we've discussed this on the Skeptic Zone, I think, recently in our Logical Fallacies with the false dichotomy. A lot of people, early skeptics, armchair skeptics, and the media especially, will look at something like homeopathy and put it in two baskets. The first basket is it's a total scam and the people doing it are monsters and just out to scam you. And the second basket is, it totally works and, this is something that we've yet to discover. Mm-hmm. And the middle huge grey area is what we were talking about, these sincere but deluded people, the homeopaths who think they're doing good. And that's something that every skeptic should keep in mind.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's something that we've seen as I've trawled through the websites of various homeopaths. You can see that they think they have an answer, they think they can help, but unfortunately the answer that they're selling is a false answer, and it's better than no answer at all. And we're actually seeing steps from some homeopaths in the UK to try and circumvent any attempt to track what they're doing. So I spotted a website last week which was talking all about how homeopathy can help the coronavirus. When I checked that website yesterday, it wasn't talking about that, but it was talking about how homeopathy can help the current global pandemic. And if you compared the two web pages side by side, you'd found they'd just done a find and replace to replace any mentions of coronavirus with the phrase "the current global pandemic," hoping, presumably, that anybody who was looking for homeopaths selling solutions to coronavirus wouldn't think to add synonyms for coronavirus into the list. And at that point, you think this isn't just well-meaning. There's a level of cynicism that you're trying to skirt around the regulation and trying to hide in plain sight a little bit. So there is some misleading stuff going on in how people are marketing. But by and large, they're doing it, I think, because they really believe they can help. But right now, we do not need that. Right now is the worst possible time for people to start inserting their own pet theories and inserting their own pet cures and their kind of old wives' tales, traditional remedies into this crisis right now. All we need right now is for people to follow the advice of governments, follow the advice of trusted medical professionals, and that's to, as we know, to wash your hands, to stay at home, to keep distant from people, and allow those who have to be out there to be out there with minimal amount of contact with people.
Absolutely. Now, where is this heading? Is this something that you're still working on? Is this going to be formalized at some stage?
So we're still looking at things at the moment. So we've made our findings available to the Society of Homeopaths and also the Professional Standards Authority, which is the government body that accredits the Society of Homeopaths. But the point that we've made to the PSA is how seriously can we expect the Society of Homeopaths to prevent their registrants from making these claims when the Society of Homeopaths themselves are spreading misleading information about the coronavirus? So on their own Society of Homeopaths announcement about how to deal with the coronavirus, at the bottom, at the top of the announcement, it says, we need to wash our hands and stay indoors and all this kind of stuff. Don't see patients face to face, just do them over Skype or over video calls and things. But at the bottom of that very announcement by the regulator of homeopaths, it said, how can homeopathy help? And listed remedies that are good for cold and flu symptoms. So even in that keep away from coronavirus statement, they're telling their members what remedies will help. On the Facebook and social media of the Society of Homeopaths, even in the last week or two, they've been spreading misinformation on those posts about how homeopathy can help with lungs that feel like it's hard to breathe, with burning lungs, and with fevers. And these are symptoms of coronavirus. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they're talking about those symptoms. I think it's a dereliction of duty in many ways, that the regulator charged with protecting the public is itself spreading misinformation. So there's some serious work to be done by the PSA, the government's regulator, in bringing this to account, because this isn't a time for regulators to move slowly. As things are developing right now, any amount of misinformation muddying the water could genuinely come with at the cost of people's lives.
Yeah, it is a frightening situation at the moment, and you're absolutely right. Now let's change tack towards the end of our little chat here. Now, here in Sydney, Australia, for many years, we've had Sydney Skeptics in the pub. I mean, since the early part of the last decade. And we have a monthly speaker, and everybody has a great time. And, well, as you know, at the moment, just like the UK, all the pubs and the clubs and the restaurants are all shut at the moment. So no more Skeptics in the pub. But you've done something about that in the UK. You've got the online Skeptics in the pub. Again, a link in this week's show notes, but it's twitch.tv/SITP. How's that all going?
Yeah, it's starting to look pretty good, really. So many of the Skeptics in the pub organisers of the various different groups that are dotted around the UK, and I think we have something like 20 or maybe even 30 groups dotted around the UK of Skeptics in the pubs. We all realised that we all wanted to be doing events still. You can't have our in-person events, so we all were looking to find ways of doing that online, and it struck us that it made kind of little sense for 20 groups to go off and have their own online meetings with 20 different audiences when we're no longer geographically bound to which pub you can get to, so we could just kind of amalgamate our forces and have an online group that anyone in the country could join, and in fact anyone around the world can join. And so we've had our first Skeptics in the pub online already. That was Professor Jim Al-Khalili talking about the world according to physics, and it was a really fun event. It had some technical challenges, as it's going to have when a volunteer group is throwing things together very, very quickly with little notice and zero budget. But we're starting to put together a fairly good looking event, and we've got another one on Thursday, the 21st. So I'm looking forward to that one too. So yeah, it's starting to look pretty cool, really, and it's nice that people can just pop along to Twitch on their phones, on their laptops, or even on their televisions, and just see Skeptics in the pub there and join in the conversation and ask questions of the speakers, and still have that sense of being at a skeptical event, even though we can't actually literally be there at the moment.
Yeah, you can encourage everybody to grab their favourite drink and have a plate of chips or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And away they go. It's what we would do normally at Skeptics in the pub in Sydney anyway. Well, Marsh, thanks very much for that update. We're going to keep our eye on the situation. Please keep us advised if anything more happens on that. It's amazing that after all these years, we get back to the same core topics, isn't it? And homeopaths must be towards the top of the list of the good old core topics that we look at. Well, good luck for the rest of the lockdown. None of us know how long that's going to take in the UK or here in Australia, but it's good to see that despite all these troubles, the Good Thinking Society is still out there doing what it should be doing.
Absolutely, we're all keeping on, and I'm sure if we keep our heads down and get through this, well, the other side will be able to have those pub meetings in person again, and that'll be a great day when we can all be back in the pub and enjoy each other's company, knowing we've got through this. But for the time being, we just need to keep our heads down, keep our heads together, and keep looking forward. Really, keep
carrying on, I guess they'd say. Well, thanks for now, Michael Marshall, all the way there in Liverpool. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Richard.
Hey, Max Fun listeners. Have you been listening to Max Fun for a while and you've just been wondering, where's the new Flat Earth podcast I keep hearing about?
Well, here it is. We give you all the facts on NASA's lies and how we know that the Earth is actually flat. Just kidding. This is Oh No, Ross and Carrie, and we join fringe religious groups. We undergo alternative medical treatments.
And we hang out with people like 9/11 truthers, flat earthers. We find out, why do people believe strange things?
We join them and we tell you all about it. We have a lot of fun. We make a lot of friends.
Yeah, we do. We joined the Mormons. We joined the Scientologists. We got acupunctured. We got fire cupped. We got ear kindled. We've done it all, and we're going to keep doing it all. Why don't you check out Oh No, Ross and Carrie at MaximumFun.org.
Logical fallacies. What are logical fallacies, and why is it important that critical thinkers should know about them? A logical fallacy is an error we can make in reasoning, but it usually crops up when we are discussing or arguing our point of view. Some people might even knowingly use them to try and score cheap points in an argument due to intellectual laziness. They are traps we can fall into, but if we know what to look out for, we can spot them when they occur and stop ourselves from using them. This week we'll look at special pleading.
This is when, instead of admitting your point of view or argument is wrong, you try to find a loophole that gives you an out and saves you from defeat. It is also when a person makes an exception to a universal principle because they are holding on tight to a belief that doesn't align with that principle.
We see this situation so often in skeptical investigations, from so-called psychics to water diviners to people who claim they have invented a perpetual motion machine. When it comes to the crunch and they fail to demonstrate their claim, they will always find a way to excuse the failure and preserve their worldview.
Normally, I'm 100% successful when I'm water divining. I never miss. But when I was tested by the skeptics, my divining power didn't work. However, I know why. Those skeptics had me tested on the wrong type of water, and that threw me off.
Believe it or not, this was the actual argument made by a water diviner after failing a test of his claimed ability. Of all the people tested by Australian skeptics over the decades, it's the water diviners who come up with the most creative examples of special pleading. None of them, not one, of the hundreds who have tried, have passed the agreed-to tests.
I know I failed to find the treasure using my psychic powers, but it wasn't my fault. My spirit guide led me to the wrong place to teach me a lesson in humility.
Once again, we have an example based on a real excuse given by someone claiming to be a psychic. Not only did the so-called psychic find a way to justify their failure, they also found a way to reinforce their belief in the paranormal at the same time. A for effort.
It's simply amazing how well acupuncture works. It doesn't matter that science cannot identify the mechanism by which it works. We don't need to wait for science to catch up to what we already know. Anyway, science clearly isn't able to discover how acupuncture works.
This example of special pleading has been used for many years by those promoting acupuncture, so-called energy healing, homeopathy, and many other forms of alternative medicine. When the scientific evidence is lacking, they will blame science for not understanding or even for not being able to understand. We humans are very good at doing everything we can to preserve our beliefs and our worldview. It could be said to be a form of natural defence as the mind looks for ways to protect itself. It is something you should take into consideration when arguing with someone who is truly convinced of their own point of view. Rarely will they just change their mind on the spot. Knowing a logical fallacy when you hear one, and even knowing its name, is important when arguing your point of view. However, you may come across as arrogant and not get very far if you call it out by name to your opponent when you hear it being used. If your opponent calls you out for using one, it's time to stop and think about how you are making your case. Use your knowledge of logical fallacies wisely, and remember that even if your point of view is right and you know all the pitfalls in arguing your case, it doesn't always mean you'll win on the day. And as skeptics, we must also remember that we too can be wrong at times. I'm Michelle Bijkersma from the Vic Skeptics. Thanks for listening.
Greetings, listeners. It's me, Captain Disillusion. On my YouTube channel called Captain Disillusion, I, Captain Disillusion, analyze viral videos of the strange and unbelievable. I explain how interframe video compression, 3D motion tracking, and stock VFX elements prove that Justin Bieber is not a secret reptilian alien, that those videos of ghost cars are just unintentional optical illusions, and that lightning did not strike a few feet away from a girl on a beach as we saw on the news. I'm real fun at parties. My best friend is a lens flare.
Eat a dimmer switch, Disillusion.
I do know other people. Sometimes they even show up in my videos. People like Skepticism's grandpa, James Randi, Cirque du Soleil acrobat Erica Lins, weight loss enthusiast Penn Jillette, and the actual Beekman from Beekman's World. I hope you'll check out my adventures, interact with me in a platonic way, and even consider becoming a patron of my work. You can do all that and more on YouTube or at CaptainDisillusion.com.
From the website of Australian Skeptics, www.skeptics.com.au, published on the 16th of April 2020 by Richard Saunders and Tim Mendham. Past Bent Spoon winners vie for the dishonour in 2020. In the 38 years of the Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award, issued to the perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle, we have never had the need to award this dishonour to the same person twice. However, with the current COVID-19 situation impacting on the whole world, some of the Bent Spoon winners from years past have suddenly and dramatically thrown their hats into the ring for 2020. While the fight against this killer virus goes on, there are some in our country who seem intent on sabotaging the efforts of our healthcare workers and citizens alike, who are, by and large, doing the right thing. In 2015, the Bent Spoon was awarded to Chef Pete Evans for his diet promotions, campaigns against fluoridization, and support of anti-vaccinationists. In 2020, Evans, via an online video, promoted the benefits of the biocharger machine from the USA. The makers of this device, which looks like something out of a 1974 episode of Doctor Who,
Exterminate! Exterminate! Exterminate!
and costs US $15,000, claim it works via frequencies and harmonics and is beneficial for a huge range of ailments. To quote Evans, "It's a pretty amazing tool. It's programmed with about 1,000 different recipes. There's a couple of them in there for the Wuhan coronavirus." While he took the promotion off his Facebook page, Evans and his product are now the subject of investigations by the Healthcare Complaints Commission, the Therapeutics Goods Administration, and the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. And in 2010, the spoon went to Meryl Dorey and the deceptively named Australian Vaccination Network, who spread fear and misinformation about vaccines. 10 years later, and Dorey, via online videos and posts, questions whether or not there really is a pandemic at all. She also posted online the following reckless request: Are you being lied to? If you are out and about in the next couple of days, why don't you take your phones and pop into a local hospital? She wants to see if hospital emergency and intensive care wards are really full of ill people. The last thing any hospital needs at the moment are conspiracy theory fanatics running amok through their corridors. 2012 saw the award go to Fran Sheffield of Homeopathy Plus for advocating the use of magical sugar and water in place of tried and true vaccination for many deadly diseases, most notably whooping cough. This time around, Sheffield is pushing the bizarre notion that homeopathy can help prevent COVID-19 and points to its use in India. She also implied there was a conspiracy to delete information of a homeopathic COVID-19 treatment. In 2016, it was Judy Wileman, Brian Martin, and the University of Wollongong for awarding Wileman a doctorate on the basis of a PhD thesis riddled with errors, misstatements, poor and unsupported evidence, and conspiratorial thinking. Wileman, too, via an online video, questioned whether there really is a pandemic, advocating that social distancing and the banning of gatherings are not necessary in this current outbreak. This advice flies in the face of the best medical advice, and we've sadly seen the results so far in countries where action was taken too late. The video has since been taken down. We will keep an eye out in case any other past winners are keen to win the bent spoon again in 2020, but we would warn them, the competition this year is fierce. And that was past bent spoon winners vie for the dishonour in 2020 by Richard Saunders and Tim Mendham. And you can read that by following the link in this week's show notes or just going to www.skeptics.com.au.
Oh, hi, Maynard.
Oh, hi, Heidi. Great day in this park.
Yeah, if you like that sort of thing.
Look over there. A yowie.
There are no such things as yowies, silly.
Might be just a dog. A big dog. I think it's a King Charles Spaniel thing. No. It's a yowie.
Maynard, if it's a choice between it being a dog or a yowie...
No. It's a yowie. Yowie. Argument from authority. It's a yowie.
Hey, you two, what are you arguing about?
Maynard thinks that dog-looking thing over there is a yowie.
A yowie?
Or maybe Chewbacca the Wookiee?
I see. Okay, we better look this up in the Skeptics Dictionary online.
The
what?
The Skeptics Dictionary online. It features definitions, arguments and essays on hundreds of strange beliefs, amusing descriptions and dangerous delusions. It also features dozens of entries on logical fallacies, cognitive biases, perception, science and philosophy. It's at www.skepdic.com.
Right, Heidi. Prepared to be amazed.
Okay, yowie. Here it is. It's under Bigfoot. It says, most scientists discount the evidence of Bigfoot because the evidence supporting belief in the survival of a prehistoric biped ape-like creature of such dimensions is scant.
You know, maybe that is just Chewbacca after all.
Here, Chewie, come on. Here, Chewie.
Thank you, Skeptics Dictionary Online.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham. Hi,
My name's Tim Mendham. I'm the Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics Inc. and I'm also editor of our magazine, The Skeptic. And today I'd like to read a book review called The Hand of God, which appeared in The Skeptic magazine June 2016, which is volume 36, number 2. And the review in question is of a book by Joe Nickell, who's a very famous paranormalist, paranormal investigator, and his book is called The Science of Miracles. Now, I have a problem, this is me speaking, I have a problem with miracles. Not just whether they happen or not, but the meaning of the very word miracle. The Oxford Dictionary gives 3 meanings, which are an extraordinary and welcome event attributed to a divine agency, a remarkable and very welcome event, or an outstanding example, specimen, or achievement. In the media's coverage of surprising events and happy endings, such as finding a kid who's been lost in a Japanese forest for a week, they far too often resort to calling it a miracle. It's hard to distinguish which meaning is being used. In the case of the wonders of saints' curative powers, it is obviously the first definition, but we won't go into here whether that's an accurate description of events. Using the divine agency interpretation in relation to such events as finding surviving people under the ruins after an earthquake or the lost kid in Japan is logically problematic. If it is divine agency that saves a handful of people from the ruins, then surely it is divine agency that sent the other 200,000 to their deaths. Apparently the Lord giveth with restraint and taketh away by the bucketful. The other problem with divine agency in such cases is that it ignores, even denies, the efforts of masses of real-life people working to create outstanding achievements using remarkable efforts with their bare hands, efforts and persistence. Thus the divine apparently looks down with disdain on the little people, being given credit for what she did not do, unless of course you believe that the divine entity worked within the rescuers, they were the divine's instrument. But that just brings you back to divine powers and divine responsibility for the natural disaster, or cancer condition, or fatal car crash in the first place, or the kid lost in the forest. The human element is lost. Joe Nickell has similar problems with miracles, what they are, how to define them, can you study them scientifically, and do they exist? In his book, The Science of Miracles, he finds issue with the argument from ignorance situation, where if you don't know why something happened, then it must be God. And the follow-up question, if it is the hand of God involved, then whose God are we talking about? Nickell is, of course, one of the most famous investigators of the paranormal in the world today, having spent almost 50 years looking at everything from unknown creatures and strange artefacts to weird constructions and miracles. He says that his approach has been to avoid, quote, putting the proverbial cart before the horse. That is, I have refused to decide, antecedent to inquiry, whether or not a miracle could exist. I have therefore tried to avoid the approach of believers and debunkers who may start with a desired or expected answer and work backwards to the evidence. In other words, starting with a conclusion and then finding something to support it. This means investigating specific cases, quote, trying to discover the best evidence and let it lead to the most likely solution, using established principles of scientific inquiry. Now, it would be churlish not to admit that that process has, in most if not all of Nickell's investigations, led to the conclusion that a man-made explanation is much more likely than a paranormal or divine one. This book's subtitle is Investigating the Incredible, and he does say in his introduction that we should check our emotions and rely on reason and evidence, seeing as I have long held that the progress of science is a series of solved mysteries. The results of his endeavours, the solved mysteries, therefore may not be that surprising to skeptics. In the past, he has been described as a miracle detective, and miracles have played a big part in his career, both as an investigator and as an author. His first book was Inquest on the Shroud of Turin, and that came out in 1982. And that's a topic that he says has proved to be a millstone to him, as he has had to return to it time and again, called upon to react to the latest claim of miraculous conclusions. Since then, he has authored Looking for a Miracle, Weeping Icons, Relics, Stigmata, Visions and Healing Cures, and Relics of the Christ. His latest book, The Science of Miracles, actually came out in 2013, but is a summation of all that has gone before in Nickell's investigations and is a primer on religious phenomena. He divides it into 6 sections: miraculous effigies, magical relics, miracle healings, visionary experiences, saintly powers, and the devil's work. The last covering a range of satanic phenomena from footprints to possessions and hauntings. Each of these sections is subdivided into specific cases, giving 57 particularly, quote, miraculous phenomena to investigate. Let's look at one of those, the Miracle of Fátima. Most readers will know that this involved 3 Portuguese children who witnessed, in one way or another, a vision of Mary Magdalene in 1917. On the 13th of the next 6 months, they saw, and for at least one of the children, talked with a figure. Increasingly large crowds gathered to witness, if not the vision, then associated manifestations, such as the sun dancing, rain-soaked ground suddenly drying, and a fall of petals. Different people described different things, and on 1 month the children were kept away by authorities for questioning, though Nickell doesn't say what, if any, manifestations occurred on that occasion. At the same time as the visions, Mary Magdalene gave the oldest child, Lucia, 3 secrets that were only revealed later. The first 2 several years after the events that were predicted, the first a vision of hell and the premature deaths of the 2 youngest children, and the second the end of World War I. Nickell appeared in a documentary when the 3rd secret was revealed in 2000 by the then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI. It turned out that this was a rambling vision that depicted, among other things, a sword-wielding angel, Mary coming to the rescue, and a bishop killed by soldiers with bullets and arrows. Nickell spends as much time on the background of Lucia, the influential leader of the children, and the secrets, as he does on the visions themselves. He looks at Lucia's background, which included her pre-vision performances dancing and singing in public, and telling stories of, quote, fairy tales, biblical narratives, and saints' legend, which made her popular with village children and an ability to pressure others to do her bidding. This might give an impression of a child being a tad more consciously and coldly manipulative than Lucia perhaps was, but a telling part of the tale are her visions of a snow-white figure on at least 3 occasions, and later an angel. These happening years before the Fátima visions. Nickell also points out that Lucia's mother described the children's narrative as childish nonsense, and Lucia herself as nothing but a fake who is leading half the world astray. An issue with the Fátima stories, as with many claimed miracles and manifestations from the past, is the reliability of witnesses. Nickell points this out in reference to the accounts by members of the crowd who witnessed the sun dancing, etc., accounts that were given both at the time and later, often much later. But he does need to rely on the descriptions as retold by investigators who have looked at the miracles at a great distance in time from the actual events. Nickell has broad experience of many claims, having investigated them personally, on site and at the time, but in many of the cases described here, he relies on third-party assessments. This is unavoidable, whether some might cavil at this, the apparent inconsistencies of the eyewitness accounts, the past histories of those involved, and in this case the fact that the secrets were written down and revealed much later than the events they foretold, are enough evidence to cast doubt at least over the miracles, if not to dismiss them entirely. Nickell sifts through the evidence and comes to the conclusion that, well, he finishes by saying that debate on the Fátima visions will continue. That is somewhat disappointing, but probably in line with proper scientific method. We have a good indication of probability, but absolute 100% certainty is elusive and perhaps unobtainable. In his relating of the Fátima miracle, Nickell does not get into the grainiest detail. 7 pages is devoted to that particular miracle, and it's hardly enough for that, and to do that would require a whole book in its own right. And there have been many of those. In this chapter, as in the others, he gives a summary of the events, witness accounts, and the background to put the miracle in context. He assesses the evidence, often resting on theories of contagion, proliferation of accounts that build on each other, sharing details that were not part of original depictions, and retrofitting, fitting original claims to later but past events in a sometimes desperate attempt to prove a paranormal ability, much as those supporting Nostradamus' supposed predictions weave a tenuous relationship between vague prognostications and current occurrences, though often applied with equal conviction to different occurrences over periods of time. Nickell writes, as he always does, clearly and concisely, though not exactly with a great deal of humour. Dispassionate scientific investigation probably doesn't allow that. Could he have covered more miracles in this book? Certainly, but that would make it an encyclopedia. And we said he wrote this as a primer, an overview of the 50-plus most famous cases, and covers a broad range from devil footprints in 19th century Devon to the Book of Mormon and Raising the Dead. It is recommended and will hopefully lead you to look at his other books, those which take a similarly broad review as this one, and those which look more closely at specific cases, including Nickell's Millstone of the Shroud of Turin. On a final note, it is interesting to recount one case where Nickell played an active role. This is the film The Reaping, released in 2007, and which features an investigator that Nickell says was based on him. That the film centres around an ex-missionary who loses their faith, finds their faith, and fights a replay of the biblical 10 plagues in the bayous of Louisiana, and who is also a woman, means that it's not exactly an accurate depiction of his life. Nickell was a consultant to the film, visiting the set and meeting the real him, represented by Hilary Swank. He later told the Fortean Times, surely one of the more enjoyable publications in the paranormal field, that I liked the first 10 or 15 minutes, where the character seemed to be doing something similar to what I do. But then it changed into the world of the supernatural, which for good or evil has never happened to me. I've never had frogs rain down upon me. The film has generally been panned by critics, and one could unkindly suggest that its actual release was something of a miracle in its own right. That's been a book review called The Hand of God. It appeared in the Skeptic magazine, June 2016. And you can download that issue and many more issues of the Skeptic magazine from our website, www.skeptics.com.au. Look for the magazine tag and then scroll down, and you'll find 39 years worth of skeptical publications for you to look at for free.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone with Richard Saunders.
And Celestia Ward.
And Celestia Ward today, yeah.
Thank you very much for being the co-host this week. Now, of course, you're quite used to being a co-host because you co-host the fabulous podcast Squaring the Strange with Pasquale and Ben.
Yes, and I still feel like a rookie every week because, as you well know, there's always some new problem that crops up with podcasting technology or internet connections or what have you. So every week it's an adventure. Tonight, actually, we're doing something special that we've never done before, kind of inspired by the free time that people are experiencing during this isolation period. We're going to be having a watch party. Ooh. Where people can join us and watch a terrible Mexican movie about a chupacabra from the 90s. And
okay.
Yes, it sounds like there's a whole lot of interesting twists and turns, and the chupacabra ends up at a strip club, and I can't wait to see this show.
Now, how long has Squaring the Strange been on the air, on the internet?
3 years now. It's just we just celebrated our 3rd anniversary. Yeah, and I've been having a fun time. There's just no shortage of topics. There's a lot of strange things out there.
Yeah, and just recently, because I always listen to a skeptical podcast or two when I'm doing my government-authorized daily walks, I listened to the latest episode of Squaring the Strange, which was sort of an anniversary episode. But the 2 episodes before that were a 2-part special all about psychic detectives.
Yes, that was very important to Ben to get us all involved in doing a bit of a real-time investigation into psychic detectives, which you are no stranger to. You've been spending a lot of time tracking psychic predictions and what comes true and what absolutely does not.
Yeah, I certainly have. It's a endless, fascinating rabbit hole. It really is.
Yes.
So that, folks, I can recommend you, after you listen to the Skeptic Zone, of course, you go and check out, if you've not already, Squaring the Strange. It's certainly one of the better podcasts in the podcast world. When you consider there must be tens of thousands of podcasts now, that's one I would certainly recommend.
Well, thank you, Richard. And I think there's going to be many more after this pandemic is over. I think you'll find that probably half the continent will have taken up podcasting in one form or another.
Oh, that's right. Maybe we should just quit our podcast and become consultants. What do you think?
Good idea. We could charge. It'll be a pyramid scheme.
There's a nice pyramid in Las Vegas. I remember that. Now, speaking of charging, now we don't charge for our podcasts, of course, but we do rely on the generosity of people who think they're worthy enough to chip in, contribute. And I know that you at Squaring the Strange probably go that extra step further than the Skeptic Zone. You send out little packages to your subscribers.
I love to send swag. Yes,
swag. Yes.
We come up with little bundles of a few things here and there that we send out to regular patrons, and of course you've got a nice setup with PayPal, so people can have multiple ways of contributing to your podcast.
Yeah, I do. It's PayPal or Patreon. And if you subscribe at the Skeptic Zone at a certain level at Patreon, then you do get a little bit of swag. I do send you out some goodies, which might include some an origami Pegasus or a James Randi autograph or something like that. Anyway, check it out at skepticzone.tv or Celestia if they want to check out Squaring the Strange. Where do they go?
Just type in Squaring the Strange to any of your podcast feeders and you will find us.
Absolutely, and I can recommend that. Well, thank you very much for being the co-host this week. This has been a lot of fun.
My pleasure, Richard.
And I hope to see you in beautiful Las Vegas when, what do we say? When things get back to normality.
Yeah, and if they don't, I might just be knocking on your door looking for a new place to live in Australia.
Oh, that's a deal. Then we could do the podcast together. All right, but for this week, this is Richard Saunders and
Celestia Ward
signing off. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello to the afterthoughts, the people who listen after the music. Here's this week's Easter egg. What's that? I thought I heard an aeroplane. That can't be right. Every now and then I see one. It's really strange. This week we're going to play the dice game. Celestia Ward in Las Vegas is going to roll the dice. Lots of dice not being rolled in Las Vegas at the moment. And it's up to the rest of us to use our psychic predictions or dumb luck to see if we can predict what number's going to come up. Now, what sort of dice do you have for us this week, Celestia?
I have some very special Area 51 themed dice. I picked it up on the way to California. There's a little shop that sells a bunch of alien themed products, including alien jerky and alien like soaps and perfumes, and I got a pair of alien dice. So they glow in the dark. I think you've got a pair just like this.
I do somewhere. Yes.
You did pick one of these up, possibly when you were in Las Vegas, but
I got mine. I tell you where I got mine. I got mine in the Albuquerque airport.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. Albuquerque is kind of like neck and neck with like Las Vegas Area 51 stuff. We both heavily capitalize our alien rumors.
That's right.
So how do you want me to do this, Richard? You want me to just roll a dice, or you want to guess first, or?
Well, what we'll do? It's 6-sided, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so everybody at home, walking the dog, in the car. Actually, you're not going to be in the car, are you? No, some people are still in the car. Everybody at home in the lockdown. Now, Celestia is going to roll the dice 3 times. 3 times, and it's up to all of us to try and predict what the number will be. So I'm going to kick off and I'm going to predict 5. That's my prediction. Celestia, please roll the dice.
Rolling the dice. I got 5.
No.
Yeah, it's got 4 little alien eyes and a little alien spaceship in the middle for a 5.
This is a setup, folks. I promise you,
All
this is
right.
quite real. How about that? Okay.
If you get all 3, I'm going to sponsor a trip for you to come over here once things reopen so that you can win some money.
All right.
All right, what's your next guess?
My next guess is 2.
Okay, here we go. Uh-oh, it fell.
Yeah, that happens to me too.
It fell
Falls
off
off
of
the
it fell off of the table and it is on the floor and it is a 6.
Oh, a 6. Oh,
yes.
Oh well. No. Never mind. Okay. One last time. I'm going to predict. I'm going to predict a 1.
A 1. Okay. Here we go. It's a 6 again.
Well, I got off to a great start. I really did. So today's...
Got your hopes up there, sorry.
I did get my hopes up. I'm not going to go to Las Vegas and try my luck after all. This week's winning numbers, if you're playing at home, are 5, 6, and 6. That's it. We're done.
That's it.
Hooray.
Okay, cool. All right. Thanks, Richard. I'm going to hit stop.
Yep. I better hit stop as well.